Ik praat nog verder met Patric Tariq Mellet, de schrijver van het boek The Lie of 1652, A Decolonized History of Land. Hoeveel jaar, how many years did it take you to research and write this book?
It took roughly around 3 years. Obviously, a lot of that reading and research and that took much longer than that. But 3 years to actually write this book. Yeah, it was written in slices. So each of these 5 chapters were originally 5 papers on particular subjects. It's not a comprehensive history. It's 5 slices of history, but for me, the most important slices.
And fascinating. The book is titled The Lie of 1652, and one wonders what, according to you, is the lie of 1652?
Okay, the first lie is the one that we've already covered.
Yeah,
about
that it wasn't a no man's land.
It was not a no man's land, but also the other lie is that the Europeans, and particularly the historian DEEL, says that South Africa was an empty land. It had a few people, but they were not really people. They were half people, half beast, half people, noble savages, the Khoi and the San. And in fact, people still perpetuate this mythology that there was only these people here at that time and that there was no other people. And suddenly there was a mass black invasion from the north. Yeah. It's all rubbish. And what the first chapter does is it shows the peopling of South Africa over a 3,000-year period. And the notion of first and second and third and whatnot is all part of that old papal theory of the doctrine of discovery, terra nullius, the empty land. What the papacy basically said in those days, if people weren't Christians, then they weren't people. Yeah. So then there weren't people in the land.
You said on Facebook that you're receiving threats since the book has been published. Why would that be the case?
Well, I get threats from 2 quarters, and at the end of the day, very often it's from the same quarter but with different fronts. A lot of people, you know, they talk of firstism, of being first, and it's a Verwoedian concept. They also talk about being first nation. This concept of nation is a European concept. It's foreign to our indigenous history, and people don't like me saying that. I am fully supportive of indigenous people's rights, but I'm not supportive of pseudo-history and fakery and concepts that are about primacy and dividing people. The San, the Khoi and the Kalanga are what I call the foundation peoples. Sure. They're not first, and it's much more complex. Almost every South African social group, have got Khoi, San and Kalanga in them. Besides those who are distinctively Khoi and distinctively Kalanga.
We're running out of time, but you met Christopher van der Rede, our previous guest, before you came on the show, and you know he's running now. He's now running Agri SA. You also mentioned cattle farming. Would that be another lie in our history, that agriculture only started when Van Riebeeck and his...
Well, that's the other big lie, is that people say that the indigenous people had no idea about land ownership. In Van Riebeeck's own journal, there's a speech that is given at a council of traditional leaders where they tell him, how on earth do you think we would be treated if we went to the Netherlands and just took land? You came here and you took our land. So they had an idea about land ownership. Secondly, Van Riebeeck tells them very clearly, I've taken your land by the sword. Yeah. Other people saying that, no, there was all this, you know, gentlemen's agreements and signing and so on. You had a cattle ranching economy, a very, very successful one. Historians tell us of tens of thousands of cattle, 20s of thousands of sheep. You had, you know, crop rotation, all sorts of things that were here in South Africa.
Patric, in another interview, you were asked what I thought was a very interesting question regarding the absence of surnames of you're saying don't call it indigenous people, indigene.
No. Indigene is a noun. Indigenous is an adjective for plants.
So
and
you
animals.
were asked about the absence of surnames.
Yes.
When we refer to Outsama or Krotoa, for instance, we never hear a surname. So just briefly, what's the point there?
The whole history of surnames, it actually appears fairly late in European history too. Europeans didn't have surnames when you go really far back. Essentially people here had a name. And also that name often changed over time. Like, for instance, Achamoa, who the Dutch called Harry, his name was Are originally, and that's where the Harry came from. But the Achamoa came because when you translate it, it's the man who swims with the fishes, because he went to sea and traveled and so on.
I get that. I want to make use the last 20 seconds for you to make mention of an upcoming book by you titled A Man Named or Called September.
Yes. I've already finished this book. We're busy in the editing stage.
Yeah.
Reginald September was one of our great leaders of the 20th century, and he died in 2013. And I think our young people need to know more about this man who came from working class roots, dedicated his entire life to being a freedom fighter. The book is going to be called A Man Called September, Coloured by Decree, Liberated African by Heritage.
I am so happy and fortunate that you came to speak to our viewers this evening, Patric Tariq Mellet. Die tyd het gekom vir Ms. Veers om nou haar sê te sê.